There is a room in Kyoto that has been locked since 1868. The key exists. The building still stands. But nobody has entered it in living memory. Nobody alive today knows with certainty what is inside. The door is wooden. The lock is iron. The building around it has been maintained with the meticulous care Japan gives its most significant structures. But the room stays locked because some rooms in Japan are not locked to keep people out. They are locked because what is inside has not finished being what it is. In this video, we are counting down 12 Japanese rooms that nobody has entered in over 50 years. Some locked by law, some by radiation, some by tradition. So old, the original reason has been forgotten, leaving only the prohibition and the silence. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us begin. On March 11th, 2011, operators in the control room of Reactor Unit 1 watched the warning lights come on and would not go off. What followed was Japan's worst nuclear disaster. The room where those decisions were made has not been regularly entered since. The radiation environment restricts access to minutes at a time in full protective equipment. The instruments on the consoles may still show the last readings before power was lost. The chairs may still be positioned where they were pushed back when the operators stood up for the last time. The Fukushima decommissioning is expected to continue until at least 2041. The control room exists in suspended present, not a ruin, not a preserved heritage site. A room where a catastrophe happened that has not yet finished being processed. Locked not by decision, by physics. After the war ended, certain institutional histories were managed with considerable care. Osaka Imperial University's affiliated medical facility received biological samples from Manchurian operations during the wartime period. The connection between wartime medical research and Unit 731's human experimentation is one of those histories. Within the old medical faculty complex, certain rooms associated with wartime pathological research have been maintained in restricted access for decades, not formally sealed in the manner of classified facilities, not regularly used, not made accessible to researchers examining the period. The review processes have been continuing for a long time. The personnel who could speak to the room's specific wartime use are no longer alive. What remains is architecture in institutional limbo, maintained in careful inaccessibility, while the university around it conducts contemporary medical education. Nobody enters. Nobody explains why, precisely. Not anymore. The original reason walked out with the last person who knew it. Mount Osore stands on the Shimokita Peninsula in a volcanic landscape so alien that Japanese Buddhism has identified it for 1,200 years as the entrance to the afterlife. Sulfur rises from the ground. Blind female shamans, Itako, conduct rituals of contact with the dead in its outer areas. Inside the Ensuji temple complex, there is a chamber that is not open to pilgrims or visitors. It houses specific ritual implements, understood to have an active spiritual quality that makes unrestricted access inappropriate. The chamber has been maintained by successive temple priests in careful closure for generations. What is inside is known only to the temple's highest spiritual practitioners. To everyone else, it is a closed door at the edge of the world, at the place where Japanese tradition has located the boundary between the living and the dead. The sulfur rises. The Itako perform. The inner sanctum stays closed. Nijo was built by Tokugawa Ieyasu to demonstrate that the military government was not merely present in Kyoto, but dominant within it. The famous nightingale floors chirp when walked on, designed to alert occupants to any approach. What the nightingale floors were protecting is less frequently discussed. The construction incorporated concealed spaces consistent with kakushi-beya, hidden room construction, common in high-security Edo period structures, used for storing emergency weapons, housing concealed guards, providing escape routes, or simply for maintaining spaces that could plausibly be denied. One such space within the Nijo complex has been maintained in restricted access since the castle came under Kyoto municipal management, not on tourist maps. The reason for the restriction not publicly detailed. The nightingale floors above it still chirp for tourists now. Below them, whatever the shogunate considered worth concealing in the most security-conscious building in Imperial Japan remains in the dark. Sugamo Prison in what is now Ikebukuro was where Class A war criminals were held, and where 7 of them, including Tojo Hideki, were executed by hanging on December 23, 1948. The prison operated until 1971, then was demolished for what became Sunshine City, one of Tokyo's largest shopping complexes, the execution chamber, the cell block where condemned prisoners spent their final nights, the corridor between them, all demolished, all existing now only in documentation, in testimony, in the photographic record the occupation administration maintained. Sunshine City stands on the exact coordinates where men waited in specific cells for a specific morning. The shoppers on the floors above the Memorial Plaza have no architectural prompt to consider what was under their feet before the foundation was laid. The rooms no longer exist. What happened in them does. Beneath the hills of southern Okinawa, the Imperial Japanese Army's 32nd Army Headquarters was established in limestone caves. Lieutenant General Ushijima and his Chief of Staff, Cho, spent the final weeks of the Battle of Okinawa here, making decisions that resulted in 94,000 Japanese military deaths and up to 150,000 Okinawan civilian deaths. On June 22, 1945, both men died by ritual suicide as American forces overran the last defensive positions. The cave complex was abandoned as the battle ended. The primary public access is to a separate preserved section. The original Army Command Cave, including the specific chamber where Ushijima and Cho died, has been maintained in restricted access. The limestone preserves specific environmental conditions with remarkable consistency. What the chamber looked like on June 22, 1945 is documented. What it looks like now, in the decades of restricted access since, is a question the available documentation does not fully answer. Lafcadio Hearn, who became Koizumi Yakumo after taking Japanese citizenship, lived in Matsuawa in the early 1890s and produced there the most significant English-language documentation of J-horror's folk foundations. His collection Kwaidan drew on ghost stories his Japanese wife Setsu told him, transforming them into the prose that would make Japanese supernatural fear internationally known. The house in Matsuawa is preserved as a heritage site. Visitors walk through the garden he described obsessively in his writing. They see the main living areas. The specific room where Hearn sat writing, where he transcribed and transformed the stories of death, possession, and the supernatural, is maintained in more careful restriction. The room where J-horror was translated for the world. The room that produced the foundational texts of an entire genre. Not entered, not explained. The ghost stories left the room. They did not take everything with them. Matsuawa Hospital, established in 1879 as one of Japan's first modern psychiatric facilities, operated in Setagaya until 1975. The original complex of Meiji and Taisho-era buildings was partially preserved as a heritage site after the facility relocated. During its operational history, treatments now understood as harmful were conducted within specific wards: electroconvulsive therapy, isolation, physical restraint. The specific ward associated with the most intensive procedures, the rooms where electroconvulsive therapy was administered, where patients in crisis were managed through physical containment, was not repurposed when the facility transitioned. Not formally sealed. Not open. The institutional middle ground that former psychiatric facilities occupy when society has not fully decided how to relate to what happened inside them. The corridor outside these rooms is accessible. The rooms themselves have not been entered for ordinary purposes in decades. The equipment that was used inside them may still be there. Nishi Honganji is the head temple of one of the most significant branches of Japanese Buddhism, a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1994. Within its complex, the Hyunkaku, Flying Cloud Pavilion, contains a tea ceremony room associated with the highest-level ritual practice of the tradition. This room has not been regularly entered for decades. The reasons are multiple. Conservation requirements, the ritual significance of accumulated intent, the fragility of materials that reflect centuries of specific use. But there is a dimension beyond conservation. Tea ceremony in its highest classical form is a practice of controlled encounter with mortality, sitting with the awareness of death in a space designed to make that awareness precise rather than overwhelming. The rooms where this practice was conducted at the highest level in the Edo period carry a quality that institutional memory treats with particular care. The room has not been entered. The accumulated awareness of death gathered there over centuries has nowhere else to go. Nikko Toshogu draws millions of visitors to see extraordinary carved and lacquered architecture. The Yomeimon Gate, the three wise monkeys, the sleeping cat. What visitors are seeing is the display. Behind it, up a long stone staircase, is the spiritual core, the okusha, the inner shrine, housing the actual mortuary tablet of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the object around which the entire architectural spectacle below was built. The inner precinct around the Hoto and the specific chambers associated with the most direct ritual engagement with Ieyasu's deified spirit are not accessible to visitors, not recently closed, in principled inaccessibility for the entirety of the shrine's modern tourist operation. Below on the slope, tourists photograph the Yomeimon in extraordinary numbers. Above, in the inner precinct, whatever the Tokugawa family built to actually house the divine presence of their ancestor has been in the dark for a very long time. The Aokigahara forest has been the site of documented human deaths for decades. The recovery of remains and the documentation of each case location, circumstances, items found, identity where determinable, has been maintained by local police, fire department, and forest rangers. Over decades of this work, an archive has accumulated. The records are in a room at the ranger station, recovery locations, circumstances of each case as determined by investigation, the items found with or near the deceased, identity where possible. The room is not a horror attraction. It is an administrative space where the ongoing human cost of a forest's cultural associations is filed and maintained. But it contains information about what the forest has taken that no other location contains, accumulated for longer than most discussions of the forest acknowledge. What the room holds is not supernatural. It is the complete accounting of what the suicide forest has actually done, case by case, year by year, for decades. That is its own kind of horror. In Shimane Prefecture, a building associated with wartime military medical training passed through successive institutional hands after the war. It still stands. It is in use today for its current institutional purpose. Within this building, a single room on an upper floor was found, at some point in the post-war management of the property, to have been sealed from the inside. The seal is not dramatic. It is a door that does not open in the ordinary way, that has been in this condition for long enough that the current institutional managers have no documentary record of when it was last opened or by whom. The contents, not documented in any public record. The building is used every day. Most people working in it do not know the room exists. The seal has held since before the earliest person currently employed there began working. It was sealed from the inside, not locked from the outside. Sealed from within by someone who was in the room when it was sealed, who left by some other means. Or did not leave at all.